Oh, you're good.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Keaton Erickson, and I am the president of the Virtual Pathology Student Interest Group for this year. I'd like to welcome everyone to our third installment of our Spring Symposium. And our third installment tonight is going to be our post-match panel.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anaisa Quintanilla Arteaga. I am one of our social media co-chairs. And to start off our event, we'll be introducing our panelists for tonight. First, we have Meredith Herman. She is the Virtual Path SIG Vice President, and she is a fourth-year medical student at Michigan State University College of Osteopathic Medicine. She'll be starting her residency next year at the University of Michigan. Next, we have Nolan Donahue. He is an event co-chair for Virtual Path SIG, and he is a fourth-year medical student at Midwestern University. He'll be starting his residency next year at Loyola University. Next, we have Chris Bell. He is an event co-chair for Virtual Path SIG, and he is a fourth-year medical student at Arkansas College of Osteopathic Medicine. And will be starting his residency next year at Loyola University as well.
All right. And next up, we have Dr. Casey Shukow. He is one of our resident mentors here at Virtual Path SIG, and he is just finishing up a transitional year and will be starting his residency next year at Beaumont Royal Oak. Next up, we have Tiara Price. She is one of our social media co-chairs for Virtual Path SIG, and she is a fourth-year medical student at the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine. And she will be starting her residency next year at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. And finally, we have Dr. Mohammed Tegeldin. He is a graduate of Cairo University School of Medicine, and he will be starting his residency next year at Northwestern University. So welcome, everybody. We are so happy that you're here with us and excited for an informative and exciting discussion tonight. So this event will be recorded and released on our social media accounts in the coming days. And for our live audience here today, please feel free to enter your questions in the Q&A function, and we will respond throughout the event as we can. So with that, I think we will go ahead and get started. And my first question is for everybody here. Feel free to chime in as you see fit. Just generally speaking, can you share with us your overall experience of the match process and any challenges you faced during this process?
Who do you want to go first, Keaton? I can go first if you want.
Go for it, Nolan.
Sure. So overall, I think the process, it's relatively well organized. I mean, so when you check online, when the ERS is actually open and available to you, you'll be able to see all of the dates that everything is due and when programs have like access to the information that you input. So nothing is necessarily a surprise as long as you follow the dates that are listed. What did actually sneak up on me, I think, were the interviews themselves. Not traveling and having to book a flight in a hotel meant that you just kind of go about your regular life until one day you don't go to rotations and you have to like turn on interview mode. So it really snuck up on me. I was not ready for it necessarily. I think my first couple interviews were a little rocky because I was kind of still in like work mode. But that's kind of what my impression about the process was. And then the biggest challenge that I had throughout the whole thing was like trying to keep all of these different programs separate, right? So you'll get your interviews, and you'll get maybe you'll get 1, 2, or 11 or 12 interviews depending on what your situation is, and they're all going to blend together. It's going to feel like the same interview with the same people, I think, and you guys can weigh in as well. But the biggest challenge was trying to find a good system to keep them like apart in my mind. So when it came time to build the rank list, I wasn't like starting from zero and having to like remember a bunch of the same interview over and over.
Okay, great. Let's jump over to Chris.
Yeah, I would kind of say similar to Nolan is a lot of the interviews kind of melded together, but I'm one of those people. It's like I did my homework. I kind of looked at the programs. I knew what I did and didn't. I was at the point whenever it came to the interview, I was just trying to get them to know the folks, especially the residents, aka the people I was going to spend a lot of intimate years for the next 4 or 5 years. So I wanted to make sure I got a good like hold of them. So that was one thing that I used, and of course, me and my wife. We work as a team, so I wanted to make sure that we were on the same page whenever it came to like interviewing programs. So we use the fridge to keep our schedule, our calendar schedule. And so as I went along, I would kept making like kind of like a rank list as I was going along. And so it was really neat because my partner, she would have her rank list and then I would have mine. So that way, whenever it came to making my actual rank list at the end, I already had kind of a rough idea of where I wanted to. So then whenever it came to actually doing the dang thing, I already kind of knew where I was wanting. It's just all about kind of taking a second look and really evaluating what I valued most with each program.
Gotcha. Thank you. How about you, Meredith?
I thought it was one of the most fun parts of medical school because you get to, you're like the superstar. You're going to pathology and you get to, showcase what you have to offer and you get to learn about other programs. It's a very unique experience because it's kind of like people say the analogy is like blind dating. You don't know what they think of you and they don't know what you think of them. So I think overall, I just kind of had to make my priorities and what I wanted in a program and stayed true to those values. And I kept a list. I can share it on in the chat, kind of like the document I would use to keep organized because they all kind of blended together, but you always want to make sure you wrote notes through during the process. And so I reflected on my, when I was doing my rank list, I remembered which ones I liked the most, which ones I liked the least. And I, was able to feel confident going into the match that I had chosen what, would be best for me. So happy to talk more about any of those, but that's just my overall perspective on it.
Great. And yeah, please put that in the chat. I just personally, I definitely want that. Let's jump over to Mohammed. What was your experience like?
I think it was overall a fun experience. In fact, I felt like it was a lot more relaxed than we thought it would be, or at least it was advertised, quote unquote. In it was a much more relaxed process. And so for my first interview, I went through my CV like bullet point by bullet point, and I like all my publications and papers, and I like memorized like the various experiments that I did and even that other people did. And honestly, yes, it's important to do that once, but I wouldn't, like for other people, I would if I go back, I would take a little bit more relaxed attitude towards things. Most interviewers were a lot more gracious and kind and nice than we assume things would be. So yeah, honestly, it really was a fun process. Were it not for the fact that it's a formal interview, I would have thought it was a very nice experience to make connections with everyone throughout the field of pathology across the country. That's a pretty cool thing to do.
Okay, great. And Casey, what about you?
Yeah, no, honestly, not gonna really add much more. I think everyone else kind of hit the nail on the head. It was honestly a lot of fun, and I think my biggest piece of advice, kind of echoing the team here, is just have fun with this. What you put on paper in your application. I mean, some of that stuff may get discussed, but I'll be frank here. Listen, I got pet shrimp. I was asked about my pet shrimp in every one of my interviews, right? So they just want to get to know who you are. And you don't have to always be tying things back to pathology in any of your responses. Like if you like anime, like talk about anime. They may ask you about it, or this or that, or just it's literally just you getting to know one another. You getting to know other residents. You getting to know program directors. Take your time with responses. Do your homework and just. It's you're building relationships and connections, and you don't know, you may not match a certain place, but who knows how those relationships and connections are going to go couple years down the road for fellowships or whatever. So just have fun, be kind, and stay humble. Shout out Kendrick Lamar.
Okay, great. And Tiara, anything to add?
Not much. I would say I was pretty nervous about, match season. I only went on 2 interviews for medical school, so I was really kind of intimidated by interviews, but they were pretty fun and, like everyone said, much more relaxed than expected. And then for me, I had kind of like a list of objective things about each program, and then after the interview, I would just kind of text my husband and say what the overall feel was, and that was kind of how I kept track of what I felt about each interview, because it just showed as kind of like all blend together. So just kind of take little notes, but try to kind of be present in the interview itself.
Can I actually make a comment on that? I know everybody says that when you're making that rank list, you should use a formalized sort of tool and give each program like a number in each of the different areas. I want to, if it's okay for me to ask the panel something, like I want to know what people actually did, because in my case, when I tried to do that, I ended up, because of course, geographic location, reputation of the program, everything has a different, different weights. So I ended up making the list and then deciding, oh no. When I do this, this program that I really like ends up going down. So I end up changing the weights I give to different factors just to push certain programs to a certain place in the rank list. I'm like, okay, that's useless. So I just use my overall gist or overall impression. And I wonder if other people did that.
I was about to say, I'm happy you said that, Mohammed. I did a YouTube video like on this exact topic. I'll put it in the chat after this, but I literally just kind of threw away a lot of things, and you have a lot of decisions to make. Just go with your gut feeling. If you like a place, you like a place. If location's important, location's important. Reputations, they are what you are. They are what they are. You're gonna get a lot of similar experiences at a lot of different places. It's just, does the glove fit? Yes or no? Do you feel good about it? Sleeping at night saying, man, I'm happy I put this as my top choice. And if I get it, great. If you don't, man, whatever. But yeah, just go with your gut feeling. I'll put something in the chat. But I didn't do any Excel spreadsheets. My fiance, when she was applying, she applied for family medicine. She did Excel spreadsheets. They really help a lot of people if you need like that, kind of break things down like that, like pros and cons, this or that. But at the end of the day, I think it's also like just go with your gut feeling.
I did a color scheme based on I did bright green for my top 3, middle, color green for my, bottom 10 or whatever, top 10. And I felt like that helped me visualize what I liked and what I didn't like. And during the interview process, if there's something that came up I didn't like, I would, make red notes. I'm like, I cannot be a resident in this program for this reason. So just have a way that works for you. Some people do scoring systems, some do Likert. I mean, have a way to remember it in some way, because when you go back and look at all the programs you interviewed, it's all going to blur together. But you definitely want to know your top 10 at least, you're going to match in one of those top ones of your choice, most likely. So have that ready to go, figure out what works for you. And I think sometimes it'll evolve as you go through the interview season.
I agree. I was not as logistical. I just kind of was like the top 3 was a little bit easier, but after that, it was a little bit hard to differentiate. But it was kind of hard because say you really, emphasize one particular aspect, but then another aspect a program might be really good at, but then they don't have that other aspect that you like. So it was kind of a balance, and just overall, it was kind of more of a what felt the best and what kind of checked as many boxes as possible, but not all of them.
Kind of jumping off of this point, what were, if there were any, important factors that you did consider when ranking your preferred programs? Was there anything specific that you took into consideration other than the vibe? Casey, go ahead.
No, that was my punchline. Next panelist.
All right, Tiara.
Mine was mostly kind of region. I narrowed it down to region and kind of only applied to places that I knew I would want to go geographically. And then I kind of based off of, what city I would rather be in. And then also kind of reputation. I did use kind of like the Duximity rankings, but I know that can kind of be iffy, but just kind of the general, like what other people were thinking about this program, how their interview day went, what's their kind of overall reputation. And then lastly, like how happy the residents seemed on interviews was big, and like how was it talking to them? Were they awkward? Was it like a flowing conversation? And things like that were really important to me.
What about you, Nolan?
Yeah, I mean, kind of like what Mohammed was saying, I had a paradigm that I tried to use, which included it was cost of living in the area. It was like networking opportunities and fellowship opportunities, and then proximity to family. But at the end of it, like Mohammed was saying, you weigh things and then you're like, well, this isn't the rank list that I want. And so I'd end up just changing it. But I think what ended up being the most important to me was proximity to family. And so that's just how I addressed mine. Luckily, there's 6, I think, fantastic programs nearby. So it was not too much of a struggle.
Mohammed, were you thinking of anything specific, or were you also going for the vibe?
Actually, for me, I actually did have like some things that were sort of like really, really highly weighted. So I wanted a physician scientist type of track that would obviously, even non-physician scientist programs will afford you the opportunity to eventually proceed to a physician scientist career. But to me, programs that had like a formal physician scientist track where you're given like a year of dedicated research, or sometimes 2 years, to me, that bumped programs to pretty high on my rank list. Geographic proximity was a big factor for me because I'm a new father, so for me that was kind of important. And other than these two, it was the field was wide open. It was just a matter of what was the vibe, if they like the people there, work-life balance, things like that. But if a program didn't satisfy either of these conditions, it was below the middle of my rank list or something like that.
Yeah, and I guess to kind of add a little bit more other than vibe, which was my initial punchline. Thank you, Nisa. But like, what type of exposure, right, are you gonna get? Like, do you have specific interests in mind? So like for me, like I already know like what interests I have going into pathology, having kind of gone through this transitional year and getting some exposure. So like bone and soft tissue pathology, for example, which is actually something that not a lot of places I think really are strong in. That's something that also kind of weigh into my decision making as well, up and above like geographics, what other experiences, research opportunities, networking, you name it. But if you have like a certain interest in mind that like, hey, I think I'm interested in GYN path, or hey, I'm interested in Europath, and if you get interviews at places that then maybe they have fellowships. So if they don't have fellowships, you're gonna get really good exposure because you have this and this pathologist, and the residents really all hype it up. That's just good things to really consider if you're like of those people who like have an idea of what you want to do, through residency and then afterward.
Chris, any thoughts? Oh, go ahead, Meredith.
I was gonna talk. So if some of you have a significant other who is or isn't in medicine, one of my key factors was my soon-to-be husband is a professional in law. So we were kind of restricted geographically. While we did look at options, to get relicensed, it was kind of important to stay in state because that's where his career is built. So, consider your family and your partner as well, and be open-minded to moving out of state if you need to. So I think location was a big thing for us. us. Also was resources that the program provided. So did they provide research funding? Did they provide book funds? Those kind of things matter as a resident. So I looked at programs that provided enough resources for those residents. I think those are the biggest things next to vibe check, location, cost of living. That's how I made my list.
Yeah, and I probably have to say the big thing for me is me and my wife, we're a team. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her, to be straight up. And so I always would try to get her opinion on any place because she's a nurse. So thankfully, there's never a shortage of nursing opportunities, especially if path residency is available. There's a good chance there's going to be some sort of nursing opportunity there. But that was always kind of like a big thing. If it was like a city that they didn't feel comfortable moving to or something like that, that weighed heavily on what I wanted to do as far as where I wanted to go as far as programs go. Because that would be that was one thing is I want to be able to focus solely on my path residency, and I never want them to feel like they're in a situation they don't want to be in. Because then I would be stressed and I wouldn't be able to concentrate on my path residency if they wasn't happy. It's kind of my mindset. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Just like bouncing off what everybody has said, try to establish some non-negotiables for yourself. If you don't want to set up like some kind of paradigm with like weighted values based on whatever, just understand what you are not willing to give up for the next step of your life, and use that to kind of weigh your different options. So I knew that if I was going to leave Illinois, it was going to be for a really good reason. And so, you can kind of hold programs to higher expectations if they don't meet your, if they don't meet that criteria. So it's, a suggestion.
Yeah, I guess kind of like bouncing off that too. I think it's also just as important to consider not just like the in the workplace, but like what programs are going to allow you to like be away from the workplace and like be in areas where like if you have a family of your own or nearby, you can be with your family. If your fiance, wife, husband, whatever is also in medicine or is also in like law or is also a professional, or you have well, long story short, at the end of the day, residency as a job, as someone who has worked a job for the past year in medicine, right? It's so there's going to be a point where yes, it's like it's educational, you are learning, you're training, the bits and pieces, yada yada yada. But I think it's also important to really consider programs too, where like, yeah, you're going to work hard, but like you're going to have time to have fun. You're going to have time to get away and be away. You're going to have time to get to know your other co-residents, your other staff, faculty, not just at the program, but maybe opportunities for like a Friday night, go out, have some beer, whatever. That's all like really important stuff. And I think kind of, especially going through this the second time around, that's stuff that I think really for me personally, like, I love my partner. I really want to be with my partner and have time with her, as we both go through residency, right? And so, long story short, if you find yourself interviewing at places or at a place and it's like, people here are kind of like not happy because of this, and this, overworked. Yeah. I mean, you're going to work hard, but like, don't work too hard. There's a big learning curve. We're all going to go through it, but like, you got to have fun doing it, and you got to have opportunities to have fun doing it at, wherever the program is at and then outside of the program. So that stuff's, it's important.
Yeah, I think that all of that is like really great advice to keep in mind. So I'm a current third year about to transition into my fourth year. So I guess what I'm curious about is put yourself back in my shoes. And at the very beginning of your ERAS application journey, sort of like think about that, and then tell me if there's like anything that you would have done differently, or if there's any like big, pitfalls that I should try to avoid, or, not just me, but everybody else on the call too. Let's start with Tiara.
Hi. Yes, so I would say to be open and like don't discredit yourself from a program that you really like, but you don't think you have a chance. I was just chatting with someone who asked about if you are DO or IMG, should you still apply to programs that don't have a lot of those? And I would say for that, if you're a strong applicant and there's no DOs or no IMGs, it's worth, applying to those if you think that you have a shot. And even if you don't, I would still, say go for it. If you get an interview, then I wouldn't think anything of it. The fact that you're a DO or an IMG, if they ask you for an interview, then they're really looking at you, and that doesn't matter to them. I mean, it shouldn't matter to them, but yeah, so that would be my advice is just to put yourself out there and don't be afraid to kind of shoot for what you want.
Okay, great. Let's go to Mohammed.
I think for me, the one thing that I would change is I would just take things a little bit easier, and I would sort of not be very rigid in how I would prepare for the interviews. I think that attitude changed sort of towards the middle of the interview season. I started to loosen up a little bit, and it really mattered. And I think a lot of people here would resonate with this, but like the interviews that happen sort of in the middle of my, and because towards the end you're sort of really tired. At the beginning you're really tense. In the middle you loosen up and you sort of like, oh, you know what, I'm not going to prepare much. You just see the subspecialty of whoever is interviewing you and you're like, okay, I'm going to wing it. And usually these are the interviews that I did best in terms of how I evaluate my own performance. Some of which I knew I did best in these interviews, because you get the interest letters, people telling you they ranked you highly or whatever. So yeah, that's the one thing I would change.
Okay, great. Let's jump over to Meredith.
So we're talking about things we would have done differently for ERAs for the application process.
Yeah.
I just shared a link in the chat that Lauren Miller put together that I actually used to help put my CV together. And I think the biggest thing is be prepared and be proactive, and make sure you get things in on time. The longer you wait and delay, the more your application gets pushed to the bottom. So be on your A game. This is your chance to shine. You worked for this, so don't mess it up, right? So get your materials together, get your letter of recommendations in by the due date, get your CV ready and proofread, visit a writing center, have people read over your personal essays, stuff like that. Like that really helped me a lot because I felt like I had as perfect as possible application. I felt good when I was submitting. My other advice is beef up your bio section, talk about your pet shrimp. I talked about my art, and I had things to show and tell. So people wanted to see my art. I had things ready to go for my interview because that's what they would bring up. They wanted to get to know you. So put things on there that represent you and be realistic. Like, are you, I'm trying to think of something like, are you a baker? Okay, everyone likes to bake, but do you actually bake? Can you talk about it in a conversation? So only put things on your bio section that you can actually talk about pretty coherently and have a lot of experience to back it up. So so just have a few interesting things ready to go about you and just have fun with it. Honestly, I felt like only a few things they talked about my ERAS application. Everything else was just getting to know you as a person.
Can I actually harp on that point a little bit? Like when you talk about the early application, I want to really emphasize that point from Meredith. Like I applied late. So I was one of those people who didn't have the step 2 score. So for IMGs, you need to have the both step 1 and 2 and the ECFMG certificate by the time you are applying. So I didn't have that. My step 2 score was 2 weeks late. And that actually cost me some programs that would have been in my top 3 on my rank order list. So literally when my score was out, I was like, I'm happy with my score. Here's my score. And then literally two of the coordinators explicitly told me, we already went through one pass through the applications and yours was passed over. I was like, this is only 2 weeks. So just, I want to really emphasize that point. You want to be ready by the beginning of the day. But at the end of the day, if that's going to cost you, your score, maybe it's not worth it, but just keep that in mind. Yeah.
Okay, great. Let's jump to Chris now.
Yeah, that was kind of a tough question because I'm thankful that I went full send and was completely open with as many programs as I could. But whenever you said the question, like, what would you change? There were, I'll admit, I'm kind of ashamed of it. There were programs where I was more conservative. For example, like, I'm a pretty proud dad. You know, that's, you could look at my Instagram and social media and stuff like that. It's in the name Path Dad, right? And there was one program, you know, I just failed to mention that. And that's another thing that kind of goes back to the rank order list, is like when you're looking at programs and you're thinking back on the interview, which interview did you feel the most like calm, relaxed, that you felt like you gave your most 100% authentic self to? Because in addition to them interviewing you, you're looking at them and you want to bring your full honest self. Because if you're answering questions how you would if you were just sitting in the residence room versus, you know, being uptight and like trying to give the most safe answer, I think those are two different personalities type of deal. So you definitely want to bring your personality at the water trough or whatever, or water cooler. That's the self you want to bring to the interview.
Okay, yeah, that's really good advice. Let's go with Nolan next.
So things that I would change or do differently about the application or about my like timeline, like just objectively, I'd get everything in faster. Nothing was late, but you can't kind of discredit the comfort that you get from having it done and just like getting to wait. You know, there's added anxiety from just like sitting waiting for the thing to lock in because there's no like final submit button. You just set it all up and you wait. But yeah, no, just doing everything sooner. So like I really lagged on my letters of recommendation. And I was very fortunate to have faculty members that were like, are you gonna like hurry up and ask me about like, because I'm like, I want to get this out. You know, other than that, solidifying my personal statement earlier so that like all the last minute panic changes can happen sooner than the last minute. So like I had a draft of a personal statement that was very kind of out there and avant-garde, and I sent it to some people, and some people were like, yeah, it's pretty good. And then I sent it to my brother, who's 7 years older than me and has not ever minced a word, and is like, he was like, hey man, this is garbage. And so, you know, I got to rewrite it all kind of at the last minute. But yeah, you know, just try to do everything as soon as you possibly can. It just makes the process easier.
Okay, gotcha. And Casey.
Yeah. No, I think I don't have really have much more to add. I think I'm gonna hit the nail on the head here. Just be proactive, be on time. You know, with letter writers, like I'm gonna be really honest, get people that are going to write you high quality letters. They might not be the biggest name in the field, and frankly, they don't need to be the biggest name in the field. They don't even need to be a pathologist, although getting a pathologist or two, obviously, with pathology helps. But you want someone that's gonna vouch for you. And I think that's one thing I just really want to harp on. This with me when I applied pathology, it was my second time applying. I applied for a different field the first time around, and that's a different conversation for a different day. I'm happy to talk about what it's like to not fully matching, going through weighing soap and yada yada yada. But just get people who are going to vouch for you, and try and make those connections early. You know, if you did pathology residency in another country, I know you gotta have a faculty mentor or someone from that other country that can really say like, oh my gosh, you've busted your buns and you can practice pathology anywheres, stuff like that. It could be a private community pathologist, maybe it had a couple publications or zero publications, it don't matter. At the end of the day, if I'm an employer and I'm looking to hire somebody to be an employee, which that's what you are, right? I want to see letters that are going to vouch for you as a human being, as a teammate, which is important because this is a team game, right? As with any, or many other fields in medicine, the teamwork's important. And just try to build those connections early, and be real, That's it. Be authentic, have fun, be cool, be chill. If you're going on if you're able to set rotations early, work hard during those rotations, but don't be annoying. And I say that graciously because I think a lot of people I remember where it's like going through rotations and like, oh my gosh, like anxiety and anxiousness and oh my gosh, I want to have everything. You're not gonna know everything. 10 years down the road, none of us on this panel are going to know everything about everything about pathology. That's why you're in this field. You're gonna learn a lot, you're gonna know a lot, but there's so much more out there. And it's about being willing to like, hey, I got to a point where I think I know this, I know what this answer is, or I have no idea what this answer is. Please tell me how we go about this and work together and have fun doing it. It's that simple. At least easier said than done, but that's kind of my 2 cents.
If I can throw in like a quick pro tip for getting a letter of recommendation from a patient-facing clinician instead of a pathologist. A way that you can kind of screen quickly, because you're never going to know like what the quality of the letter of recommendation is going to be unless they have you write it, which is ethically dubious. But a quick way to see like if this clinician is going to give me a decent letter of rec is like when they write notes on patients, if their note is like patient past gas will continue to monitor, maybe not the one you're looking for, but like if it's someone who gives like a very well like a strong history, very detailed history and a detailed plan, maybe you can try to ask those people for letters of recommendation if you're going to go with somebody who's not a pathologist. Just a little tip.
I love that tip. I just want to say that's such a great tip. I love some of the people I work with, but man, some of those notes, they stink. So
are your notes up to par, Casey?
Yeah, I try. I mean, I brevity is important. I try to be brief where I can, but I second everything Nolan said, and my notes were they'll never be perfect enough.
Any other pro tips or general advice that you all would give to future medical students about to go through the match or going through the match? What would you tell them? Let's start with Chris.
It's gonna be okay. You got this. You've made it this far. Just, I know it's cliche, but genuinely be yourself. Dr. Glockenflecken jokes at how friendly the pathologists are. Like genuinely, they're all good folks. You're at this point. Just have fun with it, man. Like they're all really, really good folks, and you'll have a great time.
Thanks for that, Chris. Meredith, any hot pro tips?
I just want to drop my 2 cents about Path Elective. My video on away rotations is on there. I'm also available to chat on Twitter and answer any additional questions because I could go on all day about this. My advice, have fun and be yourself. You are interviewing this program as much as they are interviewing you. So have standards and stick to it. And also I think it all works out for the end. My thing was be mentally prepared to not match at your number 1 choice. That does happen. And as soul crushing as it is, it's going to be okay. Your number 2 is still your top choice. You don't have to be your number 1 all the time. So just have faith in the process and everything's going to work out. And sometimes your number 1 choice isn't going to be the best one for you. So some things just work out differently than you anticipate, and that is completely okay. So just mentally prepare yourself for any of those outcomes.
Sage words of wisdom. Thanks. Nolan?
Yeah, so Meredith, I don't remember who told me, but somebody had passed along the advice saying that your number 1, your opinion and your assessment of your number 1 program is going to be gilded in gold, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just like it's difficult to make a fair judgment of a program that like you visualized yourself in. Whereas your number 2, 3, and below tend to be a lot more realistic. Other things, I would say make it your business if you can. I mean, so there's like a lot of logistics that are involved with this, but if there's a program that you're interested in, try to make it your business to rotate there, which is like way easier said than done, right? But if it's something that you can make work out, then it would just be a boon to you to do so. Not only does it get you some face-to-face time with the program, It also kind of helps you dispel, if you're offered an interview by that program, it lets you kind of dispel a lot of the act that they might put on for you. So, for example, I had spent some time with a program, and I got to see how the program really works. And then on the interview day, it was not the same. Like even the attitudes and behaviors of the people that were interviewing me were not the same, which was like a gigantic red flag, right? So, if that's something that you can do, then I would recommend you rotate at programs you're interested in.
Thank you. Mohammed, any pro tips or advice?
Sure, yeah, there's a lot, but I think my number one would be don't dismiss what existing residents or graduates from the program tell you, even if it's a general gist, or even if it's like, oh, I'm sure they're going to fix this, or they're working on changing that. Because now I don't have the counterfactual, like what if I didn't actually listen to what they said? But I know that there are programs that, were it not for the open house and comments that some existing residents said during the open house, they would have made it to at least my top 5, if not my top 2 or top 3 of my rank order list. But then you go to these open houses or other ways of communicating with the residents, and they say things like, for example, you would ask them or someone would ask, why did you choose this program? And their answer would be something like, well, it's just what I got in my rank order list. I didn't really get a choice, something like that. Or they tell you, it's a job, and you pass your time until you finish, and you sort of can read between the lines, and you can really sense the difference in enthusiasm and the workload. Really take those seriously. That would be my number one advice for when you go through the interview season.
For sure. Good to read between lines. Check the vibe for sure. Tiara, any thoughts?
I would have to agree with Nolan a lot. Away rotations are really key for me. I felt kind of the most comfortable ranking programs that I had been to, because I just felt like I really knew them, and it didn't feel as risky, just ranking like a program based off of, an interview. So definitely try to do as many as you can if possible. And at least, if you're really looking into one place, try to go there at least. And then I would also say kind of just a plug for like Match to Path events and PathSig too, like webinars and things like that just really helped me to kind of get a good grasp of the application process, and kind of gave the sense of community and helped to know that like others had been through the process and it worked out for them. So it'll work out for you too.
And that's not to say that if you don't rotate at a program, you won't match there. It's just extra information for you. In fact, I think I would maybe wager that most people might not rotate at the program that they actually match at, and that's perfectly okay.
I think the benefit, because I did a bunch of aways, and I think, was it worth it? Yes. I think the benefit of it is seeing what kind of environment you would like to work in. You get to network with a bunch of people. Even if you don't match there, you still make a lot of great friendships and colleagues and connections. So, I mean, I think it's totally worth it, even if you don't match there. So you learn how a program runs, how bigger programs run, and it helps you have a special eye for different red flags or things that you want in your ideal program.
Casey, any other tips or advice?
Yeah. I'll do my tip as like a hypothetical. So let's say I'm a resident. Not hypothetical, I actually am a resident. And you are a medical student rotating with me. If it's 3 o'clock, or if it's 2 o'clock, or if it's 4 o'clock, whatever in the afternoon, and there's really not much more going on that's of educational value for medical students. If the resident says a medical student, you are okay to go home. There's not much more. See you tomorrow. Do you try to say, well, no, I could do more, I could do? No. If you're rotating at a place and they say, hey, it's okay, go home, we'll see you tomorrow, get the heck out of there. You're gonna be doing this stuff for years. It's great to be, and I'm team enthusiasm, as many of the panelists on this lovely webinar know. But just say, hey, have fun. Social skills are important. They're really important, even if you're behind the microscope for many hours a day. You gotta know how to work with people, talk with people, read the room, again, vibe. Going back to that. Long story short, you get a chance to rotate somewhere. Even if it's a place you really love to, you really want to be at this place. Like, don't always say every other minute, man, I really want to be here. I really want to be here. This attending, hey, I really want to be. They get it. That's why you're there rotating. Talk about other things, or just like, hey, or if attending is giving a conference or something, just stop and listen. If you think you have a question at the end of it, ask the question. Go back to grade school, right? Keep it simple, right? So again, long story short, social skills are very important because, again, you're going to be an employee. You're going to work with others. I work with others that I love as residents. I work with others that I frankly do not love as residents, because of this or that, social stuff, teamwork. Okay, that's my pro tip.
Eaton, would you care to have us share red flags?
Absolutely, I would. Why don't you start, Nolan?
Okay, I've been itching to share this just because it's like in my whole like frame of reference. My whole like all my thoughts are based around this. So when you interview with places, something everybody can steal this, and so now everyone will be asking this question. Go ahead and ask them if you could change one thing about the program right now. No strings attached. Nobody will stop you. You have the money to do it. What would you change? If they say nothing, they should say something. Okay. There should be something that they want to change. And if they don't have anything that they want to say, then you're like, well, is it something that they don't want me to know? Like what kind of problems exist here? And maybe I'm reading too much into it, but then, people should have kind of the self-awareness and the humility to speak ill about their own program or be critical of their own program, where it's due. So, watch out for people who are, not willing to criticize themselves.
Yes, I was gonna hop on that train, Nolan, and say, know what your weaknesses are as an individual and be ready to talk about them openly, honestly, and address how you're working on it. Me, for example, I am a very impatient person. My fiance is a very patient person, and she has helped me bring my impatience to more of an appropriate level. I never had road rage, but I would always get more angsty behind the car, right? That was a problem of me for years, but I've learned the importance of, hey, you know what? Take your time, do a little breathing exercises. Things are going to get on as they do. So long story short, everyone's got weaknesses. No one here is perfect. That's part of life. That's part of being a human being throughout this process, and be a human being throughout this process.
Okay, great. Let's go to Tiara.
I would say one of the things that I like to ask, if I saw, like, I would always research, who's going to be interviewing me the day before. And if I saw that like someone had gone to residency there and then now they're like employed there, I always ask them like what changes have been made and Nolan said, what are you going to make? And a lot of times some like deep things would come out, like how the residency used to be. And you could kind of tell, like, if they were kind of exaggerating how it's changed since then, or like sometimes it really seemed like they genuinely did change a lot too. So I thought that was a nice question that I always like to ask.
Okay, great. Let's go to Mohammed.
Sure. I have a little bit of an unconventional red flag, or let's call it a yellow flag. It's not really a red flag, but it's something that when I see, I sort of use it would make me stop and think a little bit. I noticed that some programs would really overemphasize step 3 before you start, or like within like a very short period of starting. And I noticed that there's a correlation between that and what other cues I get during the actual interview in terms of their patient load and so on. So it's basically, some programs even try to enforce it by making you like sign waivers and things like that. To me, that usually tells me something about, okay, what's the expected workload? Another related one would be programs that the interview is overly focused on grossing, and to the extent that they may even have, you know, 2 of your interviews be purely focused on grossing with, you know, the PA or something that is just focused on grossing. And there's nothing wrong with interviewing with a PA, but if it's just about the grossing per se, to me that says something about how much work you're going to be doing versus learning. That would be my red flag that I didn't see many people talk about, but I did see it in my own interviews.
Oh, that's really interesting. I didn't even think about that, like the emphasis on grossing, but that's something that I'll keep in mind for sure. Let's jump to Meredith.
Yeah, I would reiterate what everyone has said about, finding out red flags. A lot of times, programs aren't going to go out and tell you that. They're trying to put on their best selves. So you're kind of like a detective and investigator. So you need to figure out how to craftily put together very pointed questions in a very sophisticated way that gets to the chase. So throughout the interview season, you'll get better at it. I wouldn't go out and say, what's your red flag? What's the worst part about your program? No, you have to ask in a very nice way. Say, tell me about a time where something went wrong in the program and you went to the program director and they changed it. How did they address the problem? And ask for concrete examples. Say, what is one thing they've changed in the program in the past year? Would you choose this program again? Those sorts of things get to the chase in a very nice way. So, I think just having a list of questions and learn from other colleagues what they ask and how they ask it. Another one I like to ask was, how would you describe your program director in 3 words? And if they said supportive, listener, proactive, I knew those were good signs, but if they didn't really have anything nice to say, I kind of had a bad feeling. Like if the program director didn't look out for the residents, I wouldn't want to go there. So those are sorts of things that you will want to definitely ask. So think of some questions on how to get to it, but you'll develop those questions that you want to ask again and again for quality assurance throughout the entire interview. Ask every program these questions because you will need to know that answer when you come to make your rank list.
Gotcha. And then Chris, let's jump to you.
Yeah, there's 2 very big ones for me. Just as a person that's been working in healthcare prior to med school, the big phrase that pays is, it is what it is. If you hear that coming from a resident or something like that a bunch of times, you're like, all right, that's a huge red flag from working in major tough labs before that comes up. So if you hear it is what it is, that's a major red flag for me. And then another one is, my spirit animal is a golden retriever, straight up. I am a huge relationship person. And so if I only get a chance to interact with maybe one resident out of the entire cohort, or not, and not have like a single meet and greet opportunity or something like that, like I said, I'm a big people person and I want to make sure the people I'm spending a lot of my time with, I can get along with. If I don't get a chance to interact with them during the interview or prior to, in any shape or form, big red flag for me.
Gotcha. Okay, so it definitely seems like something we learn as we go through the process on how to maybe have a better eye as far as what is a red flag and what isn't. Okay, well, I think just to respect everybody's time, I think that sort of is the end of our post-match panel. I want to say thank you so much to our panelists. You guys were great, and honestly gave some like really tangible things that I'm going to be taking forward in my match process, going forward in this year. And we also appreciate your commitment to spreading this extremely worthwhile advice to everyone that was here, and that everybody who will watch the recording. And also, I just want to say that we all wish you the best and all the luck in your transition to your first year of pathology residency.
For sure. Best of luck to everyone. And before we let all of our viewers go for the evening, we just want to plug our final installment of this year's spring series, which is Follow the Specimen. This event will take place this Thursday, April 27th at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please register via the link on our social media accounts, and we look forward to seeing you there. And with that, have a great evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.